So I want to talk about anxiety stacking. But before I do, I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we recognize anxiety in our dogs and the different kind of levels of anxiety they might be experiencing, because this will help us know how much anxiety we are stacking when that happens. So when I think of anxiety, I think of like an iceberg. So the little bit sticking out above the water, that's the anxious behaviour that we can see. This is the obvious stuff. The lip licking, some side eye, barking, panting, any kind of avoidance behaviours, maybe trying to escape or hide behind something. And aggressive behaviours as well, barking, growling, snapping, and even maybe biting. So those are really obvious signs that there's a problem, that your dog is anxious. But there's other stuff that's going on underneath the waterline. So beneath the surface, there's also an increased heart rate. A dog will experience tunnel vision. Their hearing will change. So they'll be much more focused on what they're looking at and sounds relating to that. They could be sweating. Their reward center is actually switched off too. And many people talk about how their dog would normally love a piece of chicken, but you could wave a whole chicken in front of them when they become anxious or reactive as well, and they wouldn't even look at it. So that reward center is shut down. There's adrenaline pumping through their body. Their bowel and bladder have been affected as well. And that could be more obvious than not. But there's all this stuff going on underneath the surface. So sometimes when we're working with an anxious dog, because all those surface behaviours, the ones that we can see that are obvious, have gone away, we think that our dog has now no longer feeling anxiety. But there's a middle level of anxiety where all of this stuff is happening on the inside, but we might not be able to see it on the outside. So as humans, we kind of experience this ourselves. Sometimes we might be walking around and we might be feeling really anxious. We might feel the weight of the world on our shoulders. We might be worrying about something that's happening in our lives, our finances. Maybe we're worrying about a queue of traffic in front of us, or we're worrying about something that may or may not be about to happen. And often we could be walking around with all of that anxiety inside of us, and actually no one would even notice. It's not until we start to get really upset, we start to throw a tantrum, we start to get angry, that people really notice that there's a problem. And this is the same for our dogs. So there's 3 stages of anxiety. There's the very mild anxiety, which just takes them out of their comfort zone. They can see that something's happening around them. They're aware of a situation, but it's not starting to affect them too much. Maybe they've started to look at it a bit more, pay more attention to it. The body is starting to think about creating an anxious reaction. And as they start to do that, all of this stuff on the inside starts to happen. So the heart rate will then start to change and the reward center starts to switch off. So at this level of anxiety, we can't see really what's happening, but normal behaviors are now switched off. So the dog will be less likely to be sniffing. They'll be less likely to be taking food. They'll probably be moving less slowly. Maybe they're a bit more exaggerated in their movements, etc. And then they'll go into the last stage of anxiety, which is the really obvious stuff. And there's a scale, so it will start with some side eye and some lip licking and panting, and it'll grow and get worse and worse and worse until eventually we're into real avoidance and aggression sort of behaviours. So whenever we're talking about anxiety stacking, what we're talking about is that with your dog, he's encountered something that makes him anxious. So for example, maybe a person has come towards him, or he's seen a dog on a walk, or a noise has upset him. And that will make him go probably into the full sort of top level anxiety. We'll work with him, we'll help him, and he'll start to relax more and he'll start to go back to normal again. But depending on where he is in this scale, depends on whether we'll stack that anxiety. So if he's gone completely back to normal behaviour, right back to his comfort zone again, the next time he meets something that scares him, he'll be starting from scratch, from level 0. But if he doesn't make it all the way back to that calm, natural, normal behaviour, that's when we're stacking anxiety. So maybe he only makes it back to sort of level 1, or maybe he's still in the middle. He's stopped with all the obvious signs, but inside he's still worrying. So the next time he meets something, then that's the starting position. So he's much more likely to get a bigger reaction this time than he was last time. And this is why it's really important to sort of get to know our dogs really well, and what's normal for them, because if we need to get them back to that calm comfort zone, we need to know what that looks like for our dog. So it could be soft body movements, it could be a gentle wag, it could be looking for food again, it could be responding to well-known commands. So whenever you're out working with your dog, get to know what's really good for them, what's calm for them, and that's what you're looking for before you start exposing them to a further trigger. Try and get them all the way back to zero again, so that the next time they see one, they're starting from scratch. And every time you're starting from scratch when you're working with them, rather than only maybe halfway back to normal again, and you keep building on top of that, so the reaction gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually there's nowhere to go. We end up with only using the really big aggressive behaviors, snapping and angry type behaviors. And often this has happened to a dog where it looks like they've maybe been unprovoked, but actually they've experienced lots of anxiety and lots of triggers and lots of problems along a period of time. Could be a whole day or could just be the last 20 minutes. But whatever's happened, it's just stacked one on top of the next, on top of the next. And then it feels like this very last thing, this is the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like, is the thing that tipped them right into that aggressive behavior. And it feels very disproportionate to what's happened to them. But when we understand that actually all they've done is scale up and scale up and scale up and scale up all the afternoon, or for the last hour, or for the whole day, then it actually makes a lot of sense that they've come to this very big aggressive reaction. So that's my takeaway for today, is that when you're working with an anxious dog and you're working with multiple triggers, do make sure they come almost as far back to zero as possible, so you're not just adding on top of another problem and then escalating it rather than trying to de-escalate it. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care for now. Bye bye.